Hey guys, it's Amir from MMOs.com with another quick weekly news recap of all major MMO news and announcements for the week ending April 24th, 2017. This is episode number 92 of the recap, and the first bit of news this week is about Bless, and not Bless Korea this time, but rather Bless Japan. The Japanese closed beta for Bless begins on April 28th. The game is clearly expanding to other regions, which is a good sign, but there's still no definitive update on the Western release. According to Bless fan site Bless Source, though, Area Games is meeting with developer Neowiz in South Korea to check up on the combat's redesign progress. I remain optimistic that Bless will eventually launch in the West, though, mainly because Neowiz already spent a lot of money on the game, about 61 million, making it one of the most expensive MMORPGs ever developed. I expect that we'll get some kind of Western beta this year, but that's just my guess. And speaking of MMORPGs that we're still waiting for in the West, we have a bit of interesting industry news for Phantasy Star Online 2. Despite no Western release date and the Southeast Asian version shutting down, PSO2 actually remains one of Sega's highest revenue generating games. According to their investor slide deck, PSO2 is listed as their top digital game alongside Puyo Puyo Quest and Hortensia Saga, which altogether those three games make up about 70% of Sega's digital game sales. This is interesting because a lot of people in the West just kind of assume Phantasy Star Online 2 is some small-time MMORPG, but it's actually one of Sega's highest revenue-generating digital games. It's big business, and it kind of sucks that it never released in the West. If you want to try it though, we do have an awesome guide on MMOs.com on how to play the game in English, so check that out. Up next, some actual good foreign MMORPG news. An independent team released an English patch for the mobile Ragnarok Online MMORPG. I did a first look for this one already, and my biggest concern was that the game wasn't in English and there was no English patch, but luckily there is now. The game is currently exclusively available in China, but it's easy to download and play from anywhere in the world. An English patch is only available for Android though, and it even has its own patcher to keep it up to date. And despite the game being very much autoplay, it's still a really polished MMORPG that both looks and kind of feels like the original Ragnarok Online. It's actually one of my favorite auto-playing MMORPGs, so if you like Ragnarok, I say give it a try. And move right along, some news from Carbine Studios, makers of WildStar. The studio is hiring additional staff for the development of an unannounced title. And no, unfortunately, our April Fool's article about WildStar 2 isn't happening either, as a job listing for a senior concept artist indicates that the game will be a brand new IP and not another game in the WildStar universe. And the job listing is for a lead combat designer with experience in the Unreal Engine and AAA cooperative multiplayer action experiences. Whatever they're working on, it seems to be pretty early in development, so don't expect an official announcement anytime soon. But it is pretty good to hear that the studio itself is not shutting down and actually hiring more people, which definitely bodes well for WildStar. And as for games we can actually play, Marvel Heroes is officially playable on the PS4 as Marvel Heroes Omega. It entered into Founders exclusive closed beta earlier this week. Marvel Heroes Omega is a separate console version of Marvel Heroes, so don't expect any kind of cross-platform play, and also has significantly less content and fewer characters than the PC version. But developer Gazillion said they're actually working to remedy this over time, and unlike the PC version, the PS4 one features local co-op, which is a nice touch. I've said it before, but I'm going to say it again. We've seen quite a few MMORPGs, popular free-to-play MMORPGs on PC embrace console, and that trend will probably continue. Both Terra and BDO said they're working on a console version, and Skyforge and Marvel Heroes just launched theirs. Up next, Cloud Pirates is officially launched as the free-to-play game on Steam. It was available on Steam for some time in beta for a price, but now anyone can play it for free. And with the latest update comes 3-player queues, Brotherhood Strongholds, a Stronghold Siege mode, and a new rating system. Strongholds, by the way, are just guilds in the game. And since the free-to-play launch, the game is hitting a bit over 1,100 concurrent players, which is a giant boost from the 30 to 100 players it used to have back when it cost money. So tons of people are playing Cloud Pirates now, and if you're curious about the game, check it out. Moving right along, a bit of oddball news from Revelation Online. The game's animated series begins airing in China on April 26th. The franchise is clearly big enough to get its own animated series. The series itself will follow the game's story almost exactly, so if you played Revelation and read the chat, you don't really have to watch the series, but if you're curious, feel free to check it out, though you'll have to watch in subtitles, of course, because it'll be in Chinese. Though interestingly enough, this is not the only MMORPG with an animated series. There's actually quite a few, including DFO, MapleStory, Ragnarok, and a bunch more, but those are the only ones I can think of right now. Move right along, the Elder Scrolls Online's Morrowind expansion pack began its closed beta testing this last week, so make sure to check your inboxes to see if you got in. It's an invite-only test with a strict NDA in place, so don't expect too much info to come out just yet. The Morrowind update is a huge expansion for ESO, and it is set to launch on June 6th. It's a paid expansion, but I suspect anyone playing ESO will end up buying it, as again, there's a ton of new content. The video in the background is actually the new Warden gameplay trailer released by ZeniMax as well, so you can see some of the new class in action. Next up, OrbusVR, our VR MMORPG for Vive and Oculus, began its closed alpha testing this last week. And while we're still God knows how many years away from a Sword Art Online / Dot Hack style virtual reality system, it's nice to see some progress being made on the VR MMORPG front. This is an indie developed title that raised about $34,000 on Kickstarter earlier this year, so don't expect too much. The closed alpha only ran for 48 hours and the game is still quite incomplete. Developers are hoping to release something more complete by the end of the year. VR technology still has a long way to go, but the tech is definitely making some progress. And perhaps a bit more promising on the VR front, Square Enix unveiled a new trailer for its virtual reality card game RPG called Kai Rai Sei Million Arthur, which is set to release for the HTC Vive this spring. The game actually puts you on the ground of fantasy battles in an anime-styled world. It's set in the Million Arthur universe, which is a popular mobile CCG in Asia. No word on whether this game will be in Japan only or international, but it does look like it'll be available on Steam, so there's definitely some hope. And it does look actually pretty interesting, and having a Vive, I would love to check this out. I do feel like CCGs, if done right, could do really awesome on VR. If anything, you know, Yu-Gi-Oh! Has shown us how cool VR CCGs could be. Imagine slapping down cards and seeing monsters summon in front of you. That would be amazing. And this one's actually backed again by Square Enix and Gree. So two Japanese video game giants are behind this one, so expect great production value. Up next, Rend sends out a surprise wave of pre-alpha invites. And I say surprise because it was unannounced. And I had no idea that the game was this far along in development to the point where they can actually let people try the game. Rend is a faction-based survival game by Frostkeep Studios, which includes many veteran developers who apparently worked on World of Warcraft and League of Legends. It sounds pretty great on paper, and I liked Rust a lot, so I'm looking forward to trying this one as soon as I can. But alas, I didn't get a pre-alpha invite, so I have to wait a bit longer. Moving right along, a bit of interesting news for Dota 2. Dota 2 is following the vein of Counter-Strike Global Offensive in requiring players to put a unique phone number to their account before they can actually play ranked. The reasoning behind this is to limit Smurf accounts. People can of course get more unique phone numbers, but it adds a friction to that process. And players without a unique phone number registered to their account simply cannot queue for ranked. I think it's a great idea because smurfing can create unpleasant experiences, and this is one way to combat it. Obviously it won't eliminate it, but it may reduce it. Right along, a small bit of news for the fantasy MMORPG Project Gorgon. And while the game is still in the alpha stage and not quite done yet, developers are working on improving the game's graphics, and it's coming along quite nicely based on the screenshots they've already released, though you're only seeing an older gameplay trailer in the background. Developers, however, are adding better textures and better character models and whatnot to make the game just look a lot nicer. And the cool thing about Project Gorgon is, despite being a Kickstarter-backed game, it's already playable and a lot of progress has already been made. You know, you can jump in and see what the game is all about. And the new models look a lot nicer than the gameplay trailer you're seeing in the background right now, so I would love to see the new models in-game ASAP. Up next, a bit of interesting news about DomiNations, a mobile strategy game by Nexon. The game has made about $100 million since its launch 2 years ago, and to put that number into context, all of Nexon America did about $85 million in revenue last year. And that number doesn't count their mobile games. So basically MapleStory, Vindictus, Combat Arms, and all of Nexon America's games only made $85 million, but here's this one mobile game that made a whopping $50 million a year since its launch. Personally, I don't like these strategy games only because they're all so pay to win, and this is the genre where pay to win I think kind of ruins it, but the genre is super popular on mobile and it mints money. Right along, a bit of additional industry news. Netmarble actually raised $2.3 billion in an IPO this last week, and it valued the company at over $11 billion, making it the biggest gaming company in South Korea, surpassing both Nexon and NCSoft, which are worth about $6.8 billion bucks apiece. For some additional context, Activision Blizzard, which most of you guys are familiar with, is worth about $37.5 billion. Netmarble makes a lot of money off mobile games, namely Lineage 2 Revolution, as well as Marvel Future Fight. And some more context, Lineage 2 Revolution made $176 million in the first month of operation in South Korea alone. And lucky for us, we can see what the big deal is because Netmarble is releasing Lineage 2 Revolution sometime this year in the West. No idea exactly when, just sometime later this year. Next up, Orcs Must Die Unchained officially launches, played for free on Steam today. The game has been available for some time in beta, but now it's basically available widely all through Steam. On launch day, the game got about 3,400, 3,600 players concurrently, which is pretty great. If you played the original Orcs Must Die, definitely give the game a try. It's a cooperative tower defense style game with some RPG elements. With the official launch of the game comes a brand new game mode called Sabotage. The game is also heading to PS4 later this year as well, as a free-to-play title there too. Up next, Armored Warfare's latest update, Update 0.19, Tanks Reloaded, has arrived this last week, and bringing with it the long-awaited Balance 2.0 patch, which adds 26 new vehicles, new maps, and more. If you never played Armored Warfare, it does play a lot like World of Tanks. It does have some more modern tanks in it though, instead of just the World War II tanks, but there are some older tanks in the game as well. Next up, Blizzard embraces free-to-play with Starcraft about 18 years after its original launch. The first Starcraft game, as well as the Brood War expansion, are now available for free, mainly because Starcraft Remastered is set to launch sometime this summer, which is a remastered version of Starcraft. If you played Starcraft back in the day, now's a great time to come check it out again and relive your old school nostalgia. Fun fact, the first MOBA originated on Starcraft. It was a custom map called Aeon of Strife. There's a lot of fun custom maps on Starcraft, so even if you don't like the RTS mode, those custom maps are awesome. Up next, a pretty big update for Uncharted Waters Online just launched this last week. In fact, the game advanced a whole technological era with the Industrial Revolution update. The update introduces a whole bunch of new modern firearms, such as flamethrowers, Gatling guns, and a bunch of other goodies. If you haven't heard too much about Uncharted Waters Online, it's one of the few Japanese developed MMORPGs out there, plus it's a sea-based MMORPG where players control ships. It's quite in-depth, it's a game that requires a bit of a learning curve, but it's definitely a unique experience. So if you like what you see, give it a try. Next up, Ash of Creation begins its Kickstarter campaign on May 1st, and more additional details about the game's node system were revealed. While I remain skeptical about this upcoming MMORPG, those interested in it can fund the game on May 1st. I am curious to see how much they're going to ask for. I do hope the game does come to fruition because there are some cool ideas behind it, and I really hope the developers can actually make it happen. Next up, Cloud9 makes an appearance on Steam Greenlight. It is yet another older MMORPG embracing the Steam platform. Red Fox Games is definitely going all out on Steam, trying to get all of their titles on there, it seems. This one is definitely an oldie though. It was available originally back on Netgame. That version shut down and Red Fox took over service. It's not too popular now, but it does have a small core player base. Next up, a bit of news for a game called ArcFall. The game is launching on Steam Early Access relatively soon, most likely in the next few days. It's an old school MMORPG. It looks to be inspired a bit by Ultima Online, and graphically it looks a lot like Albion Online, like very similar to Albion Online, or maybe even Shards Online to a degree. It's got that 3D isometric camera angle. I will know more about this game when we get our hands on it relatively soon. It will be buy to play on Steam though, so you have to pay to check it out, and it's still in active development, so don't expect a complete game just yet for ArcFall. I expect the first look for this one relatively soon. Next and last bit of news this week comes from the Exiled. The game is free to play during its Season 3 PvP. This game did launch as a buy-to-play title with a 7-day free trial, but the game never managed to get off the ground. In fact, there's only about 25 or so players online. It's actually the least successful Exiled games to launch recently. I mean, just look at the success of Path of Exile and Conan Exiles, but poor The Exiled gets almost no players online, and rightfully so. We did a Grindfest video for this game, and it was empty and buggy and iffy. Anyway guys, that's it for MMO News this week. I'll see you guys next time.